Hello and welcome. My name is Natarsha Belling and I'm your host for EY's Reframe Your Future series. We're interviewing some of Australia's most inspirational and innovative leaders. We'll reveal their secrets to success, how they have reframed their futures and their predictions for both the business world and society now, next and beyond. Our guest today is the Managing Director and CEO of AGL Energy, Redman. He's worked for the organisation since 2007 with previous leadership roles in finance, in the energy and utilities sector. Brett is currently also Chair of the Australian Energy Council. He is a climate change believer, a self-described pragmatic peacemaker who is also passionate about leading strategic change and creating a sustainable future. We're thrilled he's joining us today. Welcome, Brett Redman.
Thanks, Natarsha.
Thanks so much for joining us. How are you feeling about the future?
Really optimistic. You know, it's the journey's never easy, but very few things that are worth it are. I believe that there's a really good future for Australia, particularly in the industry that I'm in, which gets mired down in conversations around carbon and the pain of change. But I believe very firmly in a future that's all about firmed renewables and what that means for Australia as a domestic energy superpower into that future.
I mentioned in the introduction that you're a climate change believer. How difficult is that considered your role? Where do you think the industry should go?
Well, if I separate the two parts of the question, firstly, how difficult is it for me? It creates challenge, but it also means that I'm in the right role. I'm a big believer in don't just sit up on the stands and yell at the players and the umpire. Get out in the field, get out in the front row and do something about it. There are very few roles, maybe no other roles, that are more in the centre of this discussion and this change than my role. So I'm right where I need to be. I'm energised as well as challenged, but energised, by the debate and by the challenge of how do you play a leading role in getting Australia from last century, where we were an energy superpower off the back of thermal fuels, coal and gas, into, by the middle of this century, an energy superpower off the back of renewables. That is a massive change transition, but this is right where I want to be.
So Brett, for you, some may argue you have a very, very difficult job. You've got to appease customers, you've got to keep energy prices very, very low, and most importantly, you have to appease governments, because we've seen climate change and energy prices, we've seen prime ministers knifed over it, we've seen governments fall. How challenging is that job? Because you describe yourself as a pragmatic peacemaker.
Yes, I think it is challenging, but the way I navigate through it is to go down to the bedrock of my values and the values that are shared by the organisation. And so I find that if I live my values, I sleep well at night. And what that does do is it means that whoever I'm talking to, whether it's those on the very right of some of the debate, whether it's those in the pro-coal lobby, for example, whether it's those on the very other side of the debate, the very pro-green, pro-carbon reduction, and all the shades in between, including an awful lot of Middle Australia, it sits very comfortably with me that I can tell the same story to every one of those audiences. I can do that authentically, I can do that grounded in facts rather than emotion, and hopefully I can help them see that there is a pathway through this, which is dealing to what everybody wants, which is a good, strong, stable, reliable and low carbon, so good for the environment as well, energy system.
You've spoken before about one of your key challenges is restoring trust with your customers. How important is that for you, trust?
Trust is massively important. One of the first things I did when I became CEO, and I'd like to think one of my best decisions, was to add a third plank to our strategy, which is social licence. So we already had growth and transformation, but I deliberately added social licence to send a message internally and externally about the importance of how the community views us. And trust is integral to that. If you think about everything that we need to do, from the very basics of will you trust me to make sure your lights stay on, all the way through to will you trust me to build a new source of generation next door or down the road and manage energy and bring energy into the system in a way that's good for the environment but also good for you as the customer. We can't do anything without trust. When you lose trust, that's when you start to get things like government entering heavily into your industry, starting to re-regulate, starting to direct prices, starting to even build up against you. So that's when trust is starting to erode in the community. That's when you start to see all sorts of commissions of inquiry and all sorts of extra regulation coming along. Those things are outward symptoms of a loss of trust, because the community is saying, we don't think in the natural course that you'll necessarily do everything that we want you to do, so we're going to impose more rules and oversight. At the other end, we're looking all the time to build new things. So one of the reasons I love AGL is we're a company that does stuff. We don't just talk about things, we don't just suggest that others do things. We get out there and we build stuff. Historically, we've been the biggest developer of renewable energy. We're the biggest generator in the market. We're leaning into things like storage. We're doing lots of things where we're physically building things. And to physically build something, you've got to be trusted by the local community. You've got to be trusted that it's the right thing to do in the first place. What you're building makes sense and it's good for the community. And also the way you go about constructing and then running that plant, whatever it is, whether it's a wind farm, solar farm, gas import jetty, you name it, you've got to be trusted by that local community to do the right thing. If we're trusted, everything becomes easier, and that allows us to get on and do the things that the community needs doing, which then means that our business, which is ultimately serving that need in the community, becomes easier and more effective as well.
A lot of pressure to keep energy prices down because you talk about the importance of values and social licence, but the bottom line also with running a big organisation is to have a good balance sheet. How do you balance all of those values?
We think long and hard about the long term. AGL is a company that's been around for 180 years. We're the second oldest company on the Australian Stock Exchange. That weight of history does, I feel that on my shoulders. I talk to the leadership team too about the next 180 years. We are here for the long haul. We're not here for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So at the heart of what we're doing is thinking about how do we do things for that very long haul, and that allows us to engage in the conversation with the community where we can think about what's good for them. Because if you do something in business that only works for you and only works for a year or two therefore, but is not working for the greater good, eventually that will be found out, or eventually that grind will end your business model. So you've got to find things that really work for the long haul and focus on those. That's what we're looking to do in AGL. We think very long term, when we think about the types of business that we're in or the way that we're running our business.
Long-term vision. That's quite difficult to balance today because we seem to be in a society that's run by instant gratification.
Yep.
Especially we see that in politics and leadership. How do you encourage everyone to stick with you for the long road? Because that's where the benefits are long term.
You've hit the nail on the head. Everybody wants the outcome now. And in fact, at one end of the time spectrum, you've got the political cycle, which operates in hours and minutes, maybe days and weeks if you're lucky. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got a lot of what we do, which is infrastructure. People often forget that. When we build a wind farm or when we run a coal-fired power station or a lot of the things that we're doing are infrastructure which you build over years and run for decades. So when we talk about the transition that's going on in our market and in energy in Australia, there's not a one-year solution, it's a multi-decade solution. So that's really hard. So it means an awful lot of the time when I'm talking to people, and this is where I can marry up the different views in society about what people want to do, often what it boils down to is differences in time frame. Coal and gas have a role to play in our energy system for a long time to come. I can and do speak proudly of what we do at our coal-fired power stations. The men and women who work on those sites work in hot, difficult, dangerous conditions. They keep the lights on today and will for a long time. But I can also talk about, in say, the year 2050, and there are very few businesses out there that have to constantly talk about what they'll do in 30 years' time. We're one of them. I could also talk about in the year 2050 my firm belief that the vast majority, if not all the energy that we're using will come from renewables. So I can talk in the sense that I firmly believe in the destination. I firmly believe in what we're doing now. And most of the debate, when you boil it down, is about transition. The most cost-effective energy that we can move towards is renewable energy. There's a lot of devil in the detail, but it's renewable energy and the firming of it. That means when I'm talking to people that are worried about reliability and cost, I can talk about renewable energy. But what I also have to talk about is time. You can't build infrastructure. So back to my comment about infrastructure, you can't build a tollway, a hospital, an office building in a few months and expect it to be done rapidly. These things take many, many years to put into place. What you also can't do is you can't just simply shut down everything that we're operating right now immediately, because the cost of that would be phenomenal and unnecessary. What you've got to do is you've got to talk to people about time. Here's what we'll do this year, here's what we'll do next year, here's what we'll do the year after. And the destination, though, is not in doubt. So I come back to the debates that I'll have with both ends of the spectrum are generally about time, when you really listen, not about destination and not about what we're trying to achieve. We're actually all aligned on that, but there are big differences out there about how fast we can go.
Talking about those big differences, I've read a number of articles talking about, and I mentioned in the introduction, that you're a pragmatic peacemaker. What do you think are some of the benefits, rather than being quite antagonistic and listening to all the different opinions and voices, and being a peacemaker?
You referenced a little earlier, and it's one of the things I mention often. I think something like the last 5 Prime Ministers have changed as much as anything because of climate and energy.
Yes.
These are massive emotional and real issues in our community. They're enormous. The thing about it, though, is that then creates all this instability, all this change that's going on. And again, if we're dealing with infrastructure where we've got to make business decisions that last over decades, we need a good degree of stability in where we're heading and what the settings are in order to be able to make many, many billions of dollars worth of investments. So therefore, at the heart of it, what's important is that we have a stability in the community view and a bringing together of the community about what we want to do and why. If we keep chopping and changing, that's the worst of all worlds, because when you chop and change all the time, you rarely do anything well. And the changes often conflict, and that will cost you a lot more money and will take a lot longer. So there's a community logic and a business logic in wanting to get everybody together on the same page. It may not be perfect, but if we can bring together all groups into a common view of both where we're heading and how we're going to get there, that will unleash the ability of businesses like ours to make the investments that are needed and then go on and do it. You know, one of the things I talk about a lot internally, and I'm still trying to get the right rhythm of how to say it externally, but I talk internally about we're a business with 2 hearts. And I think that mirrors the broader Australian society. One heart is based around the pride of running a thermal fleet, a coal and gas fleet. The pride of men and women showing up every day, working in hot, difficult, dangerous, dirty conditions and keeping the lights on and doing that for a long time. There's a lot of pride, a lot of it's regional, you know, in the way that we operate. That is one heart in our business. The other heart really thinks about the future and wants to decarbonise quickly. It's excited by the idea of new technology. It wants to get on with things. It wants to build wind farms and solar farms. And these 2 hearts can find themselves in conflict if we're not careful. It's exactly what happens in the Australian community. You look at the way Australians vote, talk, debate, change prime ministers. You know, this is reflective of these 2 hearts that are struggling to reconcile the way that we have been doing things for a long time and the way that we will do things in the far future. If I can bring those 2 hearts together, I can make AGL a much more effective place to work, but also if I can do it in a way that resonates with the wider community, we can pay our respects. And I use the word pride when I talk about our thermal fleet all the time. You know, when you speak to people in those operations, at times they can feel like people are almost ashamed of them. Oh my goodness, you work in a coal place, oh that's awful. Yet in those communities is massive pride, and rightly so, in what they do. We have to speak with pride about who they are and what they're doing and show them that respect.
What do you love about the culture? Like if you said, I read an article again, you said that you love the culture of, you know, blue chip industry, old industry. What do you love about the culture?
I think it's very real. I think the people are very real and they value each other, you know, and without being disparaging of any of my colleagues in financial services or other areas, back when I was a 17-year-old, what I felt when I went to those places, it felt a bit more ruthless and a bit more sort of money focused, if you like. When I'd go out to a sugar mill or a timber mill or a brickworks or whatever, what I found was people who were there, you know, just talking to each other, backing each other up, cared about what the whole human was and what they were doing, and felt they were there together for the long haul. So therefore their teammates mattered. You know, it wasn't a passing in the night thing, it was you're going to be together for a long time. So how you respect each other and look after each other makes a real difference, and that by extension usually went into the community as well. And I've always loved that, and that's always the type of place that I've wanted to work.
Talking, Brett, about those two hearts, I find it really interesting. I was reading another article talking about your passion for the culture with your organisations. And is it true employees are allowed to send you a direct email?
Yes. We have an email, to keep it simple, it's called Ask the CEO, but I see and vet every single one of them, which is a KPI that is we must answer within 24 hours. And no questions are off limits. I do town halls all the time, I speak to people all the time, and we use that as another conduit where they can come in with questions. I actually want, particularly when I started doing town halls, the comms team would say to me, well, do you want us to filter the questions? There's some difficult questions here. And I'd go, no, they're exactly the questions I want you to put to the front, because this is what people are thinking. And if they can see me answering, and I don't have to give them the answer that they want to hear, but I want them to see that I'm willing to take on the question and give them what I believe is going on. And it makes such a difference to people if they know they can ask you anything in a safe environment. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to challenge what's going on. Doesn't mean I'll agree with you, but I don't mind, you asking the tough questions because it lets me air the answers.
Brett, you're a huge champion in regards to diversity. How do you lead or do that in your company?
So I believe firmly in the importance of diversity, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also I think there's really good business reasons for it as well. So we run a lot of programs in AGL to try and make sure that we're giving everybody a chance to have a voice. Safe to speak up is a core value of ours, and we encourage people all the time to feel like they can have their say and speak up, and so whether that's through informal or formal channels. We run programs. I've previously, when I was the CFO, I was the sponsor of our equality program, which is a women-focused program. We've also got what we call Shine, which is our LBGTI community, where we regularly win gold employer awards. We've recently launched a big disability support program. It's fascinating, actually, when I talk to the current CFO who's sponsoring that one, the amount of resonance that's got across the business, because you find so many people are living with disability. They may not be disabled themselves, but they're caring for somebody that has an issue, and so it's really resonating with people, that one. And then finally, we've just been redoing our reconciliation action plan to make sure that's in place. So we've got formal programs like that. And then otherwise, for me personally, it's about action and outcomes. I don't like to talk a lot, despite this interview. I don't like to talk a lot. I don't like big splashy banners and all that sort of stuff. I want people to judge me and to judge AGL by outcomes. I'm quietly proud about what we're doing for people in different groups through diversity and inclusion. We're not perfect, we've got heaps to do, but I can point to example after example where we're helping people bootstrap up in the bigger leadership positions, that we're hiring in a way that's creating balance throughout our business, but we're not shouting a lot of it from the rooftops, because I want this to be outcome focused, where people take pride in what they do and in their own achievements.
We've spoken over the last couple of weeks with these series about leadership qualities that people bring to the table. I know that you say from a managerial point of view, a leadership point of view, you lead from the front. What are some of the great leadership qualities that you believe you bring to the table? I
think first and foremost, for me, it's authenticity. One of my greatest strengths and one of my greatest weaknesses is I have a very small say-do gap. It means I'll spend longer examining should we do it, and I'll ask a lot of questions and I'll provide a lot of challenge, but what I'm doing is really vetting, is this something I can commit to? Because once I commit to it, once I say it, you can put your house on it. My expectation is that we will follow through. So I think authenticity, I think pride. To me, I am proud of AGL, I'm proud of our people, and I want to give our people a narrative that they can stand up at the barbecue and talk about the company and talk about what they do with pride. And if you think about at times the challenge that our industry comes under, and just even running a retail business at times, you make mistakes and that will create some furor at times. Giving our people a story where they can stand up and talk with pride about what they do makes such a difference to them and the way that we project ourselves. Finally, I think I bring resilience as well. It is a tough industry. There is a lot of stuff going on. You need to be resilient. Now, that's not an uncommon trait among leaders, but it is something that if we're going to play this for the long haul, and I'm not here for a day or a week or a month, I'm here for the long haul, resilience is really important so that you can keep standing up day after day after day in what is a very long-term narrative and delivering for customers and people.
Talking about resilience, 2020, what an interesting year.
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever think in your lifetime you'd see anything like this? And how has AGL coped with that? Because it's been a huge change for everyone.
It's been phenomenal. So a couple of things have come out of it. And again, remember to paint the picture as we went into this, it was like each day, each week, the floor dropped out from under you, another couple of floors. You didn't know where it was going to end. And I was having to talk to our leaders and talk to our people through the lens of we're an essential service, and no matter what happens, the lights have to stay on. The impact on the community if our generators shut down and we had extended blackouts would be profound. So remember, we went into this environment not knowing where the health issues were going to run, but we had to operate come what may. It's fascinating though that in the, and I've talked about this a few times with people lately, in the middle of a crisis you find out who you really are. And AGL has rediscovered it is an essential service provider. I mean, it was always there, but I think before this year, you'd often find us talking in sort of corporate speak about value adding and adding new different opportunities and services or whatever. Now, if you hear me speak, the first thing I talk about is we're an essential service provider. We're owning that. We're owning that because if I walk down the street and I pull aside anybody that I meet and say, what do you think AGL does? Well, you keep my lights on. You're essential to what I am and what I do. And in finding that means it became really clear to us what was important in what we do. We had to keep the lights on, we had to keep the gas flowing. More recently, we have to keep data flowing. And that really allows us to think through the lens of, okay, how are we going to look after broadly the community, keep the lights on? How are we going to look after our customers who are getting really impacted by this? And again, we didn't know how deep and wide it was going to go. Look, it's been really tough on customers, but it could have been much worse. So thank goodness for that. But there's a lot of customers that we're now helping. We immediately threw in place things like our COVID-19 support program that made it really easy for a customer to defer their payments and just give them that breath, in the middle of it. What was fascinating, you find, is most of these customers had never been in hardship programs before. So you had ordinary people that were sitting there suddenly out of nowhere, deeply affected. They'd suddenly lost their job. They were worried about their health. They were worried about their family. They'd never been on a hardship program before. And, this hits your pride when you've got to go, I can't maybe pay this bill. I need some help. If you can look after those customers, in the middle of a crisis, I reckon they'll stick with you for life. So not only is it the right thing to do, but it's good business. And we were absolutely leaning in and are still leaning into looking after our customers because most of them never expected to be in hardship. Touch wood, they'll never be in hardship again. We can get them through this space. I hope they'll be our customers forever.
Brett, interesting you mentioned about COVID-19. I think many of us have realised what our purpose is. Is that what happened with AGL, do you think? And also you as a leader, that it's really highlighted to us what our purpose is in life? It
is. So our purpose is progress for life. And deliberately it's not using the word energy because we think about our role in supporting progress in all sorts of ways, in the way that people live, the way they work, the way they move forward, and the way our industry is evolving as well. So we want to be very future looking and very future focused in what we do. At the heart of it though is, and you'll see descriptors, and COVID has helped again strip it away, you'll see descriptors that reference the essential nature of what we do. So our purpose is very much right now in the moment, first and foremost, to keep your lights on, your gas flowing, your data connected, and then also to do it in a way over the longer haul that meets that bigger community need, which is how do we get to a future where we're dealing with carbon while keeping the system reliable, while addressing cost, which is a big issue. At the heart of it is how do we progress and progress you in life forward in your household and in your business so that we get you to a better place.
Talking about the long haul, EY talks about transformation in 3 tiers, now, next and beyond. You're in a very interesting position where you are planning long term, and that's very, very important for your strategic progress and strategic future. What do you see over the next 5 years, both as a society and from a business point of view?
So what we see is, I guess over the next 5 years, what we're going to see is some change, although it's accelerating. The virus has accelerated existing trends. So we're not one of those businesses where I'm sitting here going, wow, our business model has completely changed because of the virus. What I am saying is our business model was already completely changing and the virus has accelerated some of those trends. So what I'm seeing is a global discussion around carbon continuing to accelerate. So we'll see what that means in terms of capital markets and the ability to invest in different types of things. So that's a global conversation as much as a local conversation. I'm seeing an acceleration of technology and the use of technology. Working over videos, sort of an obvious example, Australians have always been good with technology, but what they want out of a retailer is now accelerating. And I've always said that for us, our competition is not so much another energy company, it's the other apps on your phone. So it's the banking app, the health app, whatever else that you're using. The experience you're having there is what you're comparing to AGL. That's accelerating, so in 5 years' time, I think we'll be more digitised. In our industry, in fact, we talk about the 3Ds, decentralised, digitised and decarbonised. I think all of those things are accelerating, so more digital in the way that you interact with us as a business, more control over what you do. Your intelligent washing machine will start to talk to your fridge, the battery in your house, the solar panel on your roof, and the electric vehicle at the front of your house, and you'll be trading energy with your neighbours to get the best possible deal. And all of it you'll do by just hitting one button on an app that says, yeah, AGL, look after it for me. I think that's going to start to become more and more real into that future. Batteries in homes are going to start to become ubiquitous in the 5 to 10 years sort of horizon, certainly at the 10-year horizon. That's the decentralised trend going on, and the decarbonised trend is just going to be this ongoing debate about the pace of change going on in our community.
With all the challenges many people have faced during COVID-19, how do you see your role in helping Australia's economic recovery?
So our role is, first and foremost, is to give our customers the confidence that their essential service will continue to be provided. Now, that might sound obvious, but you don't want any doubt that when you flick the switch that the lights will come on. The second thing that we can do is to make sure that those customers that are going through hardship have a safety net with us, so they have the ability to be buffered till they get out the other side. And so we're doing that with a lot of customers right now, both residential and business. We're talking to them about how we help them through that kind of difficult time. The third thing that we're going to do is, and you see this particularly with large business, although in households it's happening as well, businesses looking for different ways to source their energy. And so there's a great deal of opportunity around investment in that sense. So it might be that a business would like to co-invest into a wind farm, they might want to put solar panels on their roof. They're changing the way they source and manage energy, and that gets them to a better cost base. It creates immediate investment. We've got to get people with tool belts up on roofs or out on site building things and doing things. So that's great. We're also looking to build an awful lot of storage, an awful lot of new forms of generation. We're looking to build a gas import jetty down in Victoria as well. All of these things are immediate hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of capital investment that we can fast start very quickly, to get money pumping through the economy. And in balance, we can look after our customers as well as we can start spending significant dollars to do our part in kickstarting the economy and getting moving.
Brett, as you look on the horizon, what does reframing your future mean for you?
Reframing our future, to me, first and foremost, is about bringing everybody along, which means respecting your past. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I get everybody to the destination, not just those that might like to hear what I've got to say. So to me, the future is one where we arrive at the finish line together.
Thanks so much, Brett, for joining us today and sharing your great passion for the industry and also your wonderful insights. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Natarsha. My pleasure.
I'm now going to throw to Igor Sadamenko, EY Oceania Power and Utilities Leader. He's going to chat briefly about some of the key themes arising out of our conversation with Brett that are resonating both locally and across the globe. Thank you, Igor.
Thanks, Natarsha. The response to COVID-19 has seen economies brought to a halt across the globe, triggering a series of shocks to energy demand, global supply chains, and capital markets. While the contours of a post-pandemic economy are not yet clear, there is reason to believe the energy sector will prove resilient, although a path of transformation lies ahead. Decarbonisation, digitisation, cost pressures, changing consumer expectations, and geopolitical uncertainty are just some of the forces transforming the energy landscape. Together, they're creating a new energy world, more complex and competitive than ever before. Companies in this sector all face a common challenge: hard to marry short-term commercial pressures with the need to reshape their businesses for the future. Survival for utilities will depend on the ability to develop new capabilities, different business models, and a mindset structured around agility and collaboration to create long-term value. We see two core areas of focus: decarbonizing business models to meet changing expectations, and the impact of rapid technology advancement on stakeholder trust. Our recently released Megatrends 2020 report looks closely at some of the carbon removal solutions emerging, as many companies face pressure to divest from fossil fuels and reallocate capital towards clean energy. New solutions can actually reverse carbon emissions and secure competitive advantage, not only by getting ahead of regulation, but by generating consumer goodwill and capturing value from a $6 trillion market for products with carbon inputs. We also see institutional investors around the world increasing the volume of capital allocated to renewable energy infrastructure as a way to reduce their climate exposure. Business leaders must look at the climate risk in a new way. Even in recovery mode, business can and must play a leading role in driving decarbonization. Let's make no mistake, there'll be winners and losers here. But those who embrace the challenge will secure their future, improve their capacity to create long-term value for all stakeholders, and be well-placed to capture the innovation opportunity of generation. The second area focuses on the escalating uncertainty of the global arena as it becomes increasingly opaque and new instruments of technological interventionism emerge. Weaponized disinformation and so-called deepfakes. How are you preparing for the cyber risks of tomorrow? Phishing, spam, malware, and the like have plagued companies since the advent of the internet. But this global pandemic has seen the development of new technological instruments of risk accelerating around the world. Governments, businesses, and media face a significant trust deficit as a result. Going forward, ensuring authenticity and system security will be critical to maintain operations, safeguard trust with stakeholders, protect the brand reputation, and drive business performance. Future-proofing IT systems and teams to reduce cyber exposure must therefore be a priority. As daily life continues to change for people around the world in the ways that would have been unthinkable a few months ago, power and utilities companies urgently need to anticipate what lies ahead, so they can build the capabilities that will keep them relevant in the future. So, ask yourself, are you reframing your future, or is the future reframing you?
Thanks, Igor, for giving us that broad sector perspective. We'd love you to join the conversation on LinkedIn. Please feel free to leave your thoughts and comments, and to watch the full EY Reframe Your Future series, please go to the EY website. We look forward to seeing you next time.